The oceans are our lifeline. They're home to an industry that includes tankers and cruise liners, container ships, as well as super yachts and pleasure craft. And it's a fast-growing industry too, with twice as many vessels at sea as there were 20 years ago. A global enterprise so huge and complex needs more than just regulation. It depends on a wealth of capabilities and services. And you'll find a wealth of them represented in the Isle of Man maritime organisations.
With a thriving business community that enjoys world-class connectivity, a favourable tax regime and a commercially aware government, the Isle of Man is an ideal place for companies of all kinds to flourish and grow. Isle of Man Maritime augments that with a dedicated service for the shipping industry that's based here, bringing private enterprise and government together in a partnership which serves the needs of its members wherever the fleet travels across the world. Employing the latest technology, maximising the flexibility of the internet, including new tools and apps developed by local companies, Isle of Man Maritime brings benefits to ships, crews and owners, and is helping to protect the biosphere on which all of us depend. Our members reap the benefits of our forward-looking philosophies, the breadth and diversity of local expertise, and they enjoy the added security of consular access worldwide, and ultimately the protection of the Royal Navy.
The Isle of Man can look back on a millennium of peace and stability, though when history called, Manx sailors have always answered, from Trafalgar to Dunkirk. There was a Manxman at the helm of HMS Victory during the Battle of Trafalgar, and William Hillary built this tower in Douglas Harbour to give refuge to sailors in peril. Now its reach extends around the UK coastline through the lifeboat RNLI service he created.
We're aware of our past, proud of our heritage, but our eyes are firmly set on the future.
By providing a forum to discuss ideas and opportunities, Isle of Man Maritime helps the modern maritime industry progress towards growth and development. And that ethos is attracting more and more companies to make a home here.
Maritime business in Isle of Man is very important. The Isle of Man government supported the ship registry becoming an international registry in 1984. And the whole purpose of the ship registry was to encourage maritime business in the Isle of Man and diversify the economy. We have a thriving maritime cluster organisation which supports a diverse range of maritime economies, from crewing services, corporate service providers, professional services, insurance and IT. Anything that we do in that maritime space that we can export internationally is vitally important for the economy.
Isle of Man Maritime, always receptive to new ideas, adopting and adapting them into our vision of a sustainable future for our industry and our ocean lifeblood. We are the first generation to understand that our planet needs saving and have the power to achieve it. Along with the entire maritime community based here, Isle of Man Maritime is answering the call in local ways through Beach Buddies, the worldwide litter collecting charity.
Beach Buddies operates beach cleaning events all the year round. And the key to this is that we stay on top of it so that it is sustainable. Since we started in 2006, we've now got 16,000 plus volunteers. That's different volunteers. And the organisation continues to grow. At the moment, we are being acknowledged as having the cleanest beaches in the world, so that's a fantastic accolade for the Isle of Man.
Isle of Man Maritime is providing the ideal environment for encouraging new tech companies. Marine Kleen, based at the Isle of Man Jet Centre, an organic way of quite literally eating pollution alive.
It's a product which does bioremediation, which is basically bacteria that eats oil. So it's used primarily for oil spills, for putting in the bilges of the ship. It's not hurting anyone, it's not hurting the environment, and that's what we're all about. You know, sustainability and environmentally friendly product.
Eyesea, reporting and geolocating hazards and now pollution too, creating for the first time a comprehensive map to aid in its reduction and elimination. And also by participating in massive worldwide schemes like Getting to Zero and Ocean Unite's 30 by 30. Together we can clean up our act and help clean up the planet.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the last of 3 webinars hosted by Isle of Man Maritime as part of London International Shipping Week and broadcasted live from the ELS studios here in Douglas, Isle of Man. This afternoon's discussion is on the environment, sustainability and adaptability in maritime and the marine environment in which we operate. Something which is now in the spotlight in recent years, and we have assembled a great panel with representation from throughout the industry. My name is Clarke-Vorster, and I am the General Manager of Isle of Man Maritime, and it is a great honour to be moderator today. It is my job to chair the discussion between our panel of experts and yourselves as valuable attendees. Only by making this as interactive as possible will we get the most out of it, so please do send in your questions. To make it all happen, we have Nathan Rogers assisting myself and on the controls this afternoon to take questions from you as the delegates and relay them to me offering up to the panel. We also have the fantastic team here at ELS making it all look seamless. For questions, we'll use Slido and you should see it on the banner at the foot of the screens. Also, we have a poll which we run throughout the webinar. Please do participate and get your questions in, and we will discuss it at the end. This webinar is being recorded, so if anyone is unable to make it today, we'll be able to play it once it goes live, and we will share the links with you and on our website. So stay with us and enjoy the session. Please get involved, as I look forward to posing your questions to the relevant panelists as we go. So, without further ado, let me briefly introduce the panel. Cameron Mitchell, on my far left, is the Director of the Isle of Man Ship Registry, the largest member of the British Red Ensign Group of registrars and one of the world's most prestigious flags for merchant ships and superyachts. Cameron is a regulator and service provider to his clients, which is always something of a balancing act. Cath Robertshaw is the Chief Operating Officer of Eyesea, which is a non-profit organisation with a mission to map global pollution and maritime hazards. Without proper data on maritime pollution, what and where it is, effective solutions are hard to find. In 2020, Eyesea developed the concept of using geotagged pictures to chart maritime pollution. Next is Darren Webster, is a director of Marine Kleen, which was born out of the conversation between 2 fellow ship's captains, Darren and Tim Newton, who wanted to bring an environmentally friendly product that is efficient, cost-effective, and complies with all the relative international and national environmental legislation to market. Unfortunately, Jamie from Plastic Buses has fallen ill, and we as the panelists wish him well and a speedy recovery. But thankfully, we have Dr. Lara Howe, is the Marine Conservation Officer for the Manx Wildlife Trust, was founded in 1973 and is the Isle of Man's leading nature conservation charity. Its members, staff and volunteers support MWT to protect Manx wildlife for the future by driving the development of a nature recovery network across the Isle of Man to create places for wildlife, championing nature-based solutions to enable nature to improve the wider Isle of Man environment for all, and connecting people in the Isle of Man strongly to nature and inspiring them to act for wildlife. Before we kick off, I would like to set the scene. Our planet faces sizable environmental, social, and economic challenges that threaten its long-term sustainability. We have also assembled in a studio here in the Isle of Man, which in 2016 was admitted to the UNESCO World Network of Biosphere Reserves. We have the best tech available, so this should look and feel like we are all together in a conference venue. However, we have not used flights to be all together, reducing our footprint. So, is this the future? I have access to your questions on a monitor in front. In chairing, I will ask the panel to keep it brief and to the point. Any straying on too long, and I have a virtual cattle prod to keep it moving, and I have Nathan to shout at us and throw things at us to move us along. So let's get cracking. My first question to the panel is, where do you feel the issues around the environment, sustainability, and adaptability lie within the maritime, marine, and yacht sector? And to open up this question, I'd like to invite Cameron from the Ship Registry.
Thank you, Lee. From a regulator and compliance perspective, I would say the things that we're looking at now are fuel technologies, that's alternative fuel technologies. The emissions, and that's the emissions emitted by ships and yachts. We're looking at those bridging fuels which allow us to get from where we are now to 2050. And we're looking at those fuels which provide a solution now, I suppose, but won't be the ultimate answer in 2050. Those bridging fuels include LNG, LPG, ammonia, methanol, batteries, hydrogen. So there's quite a few fuel options out there. Not all of them at the moment are sustainable. Not all of them at the moment are available in the volumes and quantities required going forwards. So those are our main objectives, I think, for the future in maritime.
Great, thank you. Catherine, would you like to respond?
Thanks, Lee. Thanks, Cam. As Cam's just said, he's highlighted sort of key areas there, both with the fuel, with emissions. And I think the maritime industry is in quite a reactive position when it comes to sustainability and the environment. Mm-hmm. And I think actually, although it's something often we fear, and we fear that we're going to be criticised for, I think actually we can turn this around and we can actually be genuine leaders in this space. And that's something to be celebrated. So,
yeah, absolutely. Darren?
Yeah, thank you, Lee. Well, from an environmental point of view, I think the main issues would be oil pollution, plastic pollution, runoff from farms and industry to the sea, and another issue would be fishing gear lost at sea, which causes a lot of damage. All these things can be rectified. We've got solutions that we can, especially with the panel like this, from situations where you've got from oil pollution, where you've got MARPOL regulations, you've got products like ours, like Marine Clean, plastic pollutions, where you've got Eyesea, which can go out and identify. You've got the beach buddies and plastic busters, and from the runoff point of view, you've got the government legislation. People like Cam working for the shipping industry, working with DEFA, working with the Wildlife Trust together. I think that's a primary thing. And again, with the fishing issue, would be, Eyesea would be a great sort of app to use. And again, working with local legislation and government to, combat that in some way, to track it.
I suppose on the Isle of Man, we really do encompass quite a lot, and we all work quite well. And for yourself, with the Wildlife Trust, where are the issues? You're on the ground. What do you see?
Well, there were quite a few already mentioned by the panel, of course, but a few other things I would sort of talk about is ocean acidification due to the absorption of CO2. Obviously, noise pollution as well from vessels can be an issue from certain species in terms of feeding and communication. We've obviously talked about litter and plastics. That's obviously a key issue. But also not forgetting invasive species. We're seeing more and more around our waters, and there's more potential for those to come through ballast water and through food industry and things like that. So that's something else that we could keep an eye out for. But of course, just generally raising awareness. I mean, we've got a really great panel here today, and a lot of the listeners will be aware of issues, but there's still a lot of people who aren't aware of marine issues. So there's still work that we can all do to raise that awareness, I think, as well.
Just coming back to you, Cath, what have you been seeing on the app? What data have you been fed? Seeing the data, we all know we need data. What have you been seeing?
Yeah, data is the key, actually. There's so much talk about how much plastic is out there, but there's no proof, there's no imagery, there's no data. So Eyesea is hoping to bridge that gap, and the data that we've been getting, and we can see on our maritime chart, is that there are issues and problems everywhere. So the more people that are using the app and the more people that are collecting data, the better we'll be set to help sort of coastal cleanups, harbour cleanups, ports, etc. So yeah, data is king.
Yeah. And Darren, from a sort of a solution look at how you deal with oil, is your product going to change how that would work? How does it work in terms of Marine Clean?
Well, Marine Clean, it's basically it's a MARPOL compliant bio-based product using bioremediation, which is basically bacteria that eats oil. So it's environmentally friendly, it's a sustainable alternative to use of chemicals. So that's sort of it's one in a big arsenal of things that we can use, and we're also looking for different products, but naturally based, so they're not hurting the environment. That's the main key.
Great, thanks very much. All right, we'll move on to question 2 now. Just a reminder that if you do have any questions, please do use Slido, and we can get the panel to discuss them. There is a banner which will pop up. Please do fire us your questions. But moving on to question 2 now. So what is your organisation doing in relation to today's topic? So we'll start with Cam.
Well, we've been working with companies to introduce the use of LPG as fuel on board mature, as I'd call them, very large gas carriers. So under the 2016 gas code, you could use LPG as a fuel from design to build of ships. The 1983 code, as amended unfortunately, prohibited the use of LPG as fuel. So with colleagues at the Ship Registry, particularly one of our senior surveyors, Bill Liddell, we submitted a design equivalence to the International Maritime Organization, which was accepted, and that enabled older, very large gas carriers to use LPG as fuel. LPG as a fuel is about 17% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, almost zero sulfur emissions, so a much more environmentally friendly fuel.
That's great. And Cath, Eyesea, talk about Eyesea and what it does.
Sure. Well, basically last year we got together with about 25 key maritime companies and with Chartworld, our navigation experts, and we developed the app. The Eyesea app is basically using crowdsourced photos when people are out and about or recreationally sailing or on vessels. By taking a photo, they will add data and add layers to our maritime map. Great.
And we've got 2 ambassadors with you today.
You do.
So yes. So that's Cam and myself.
Yes, I mean, we've been so humbled really by how many people have wanted to help. And it's a key that we're onto something, because we've had organisations approach us, we've had from fleet managers to ops guys to captains to sailors to seafarers, people want to help, they want to make a difference. And I think sometimes I talked about, shipping industry being a little bit reactive. Sometimes maybe we wait, to be told what we need to measure and what we need to do. And actually this is something that we are getting the measurements now from this data. We're seeing where there are issues and where there are problems, and people want to help. So we've grown, we've got about 60 ambassadors from various huge companies, including Cam and Lee here, for which we're really grateful. And we have Eyesea ambassadors. We also have community ambassadors, because the environmental groups have also been contacting us, and we've met incredible people through what we're doing.
I always talked at the launch. I mentioned it in terms of we set off Cape Town heading towards St Helena, and about 600 nautical miles out, I was on a morning watch, and along comes a pink Lido,
Yeah.
And in terms of actually, these plastics in the ocean, maybe I could bring you in here. Plastic. What is it like out there now? I mean, the Isle of Man's is it very proactive in what we do? We've got Beach Buddies, Plastic Busters, but is there still an issue out there?
Absolutely. It's still an issue, but we are very good with Beach Buddies and organisations like that, who are actively getting people involved in removing the litter and the plastics from the environment. And also there's a government initiative as well, which is Fishing for Litter, which is encouraging the fishing industry to help remove any litter from the marine environment as well. And that was set up last year, so that's another great project. And of course, the work that Catherine's doing, but it is still a problem, yes, and there's still more that we can all be doing.
Okay, great. And going to Marine Clean now, your organisation, what are you doing actively?
Well, we approach all different industries in the maritime sector, whether it be from ship's captains, from engineers on board, so you can use it in the bilges. If it's ship's captains, you have a spill around the boat. Obviously, you're reporting it, but instead of using, chemicals, you can reduce the spill around the boat. It contains it. We go to harbour masters, and they can have a part of it as a spill kit. You can use it on your SOPEP kit on board as an emergency if you have, containing the oil, and just generally going to all the forums that we can possibly get to at the moment. It's obviously remote, and we want to try and keep it that way as well, which is, I think, is a great initiative. But just get the awareness out there that there is products out there that you can use. We're researching all sorts of alternatives as well, and it's just bringing awareness to the industry at large that there is something that you can use that's not harmful, that is MARPOL compliant and cost effective as well, but safe. So it's just getting people out there.
I love how as a cluster we have all this availability and talent on the Isle of Man. It is great. So let's see what questions now we have from the audience. If you'd like to just pop it up. So how will the data that is captured with the use of technology to identify pollution be of benefit if, when shared and made available to these responsible, no action is taken by the countries where the pollution is identified? Cath, have you got a question? Have you got another?
Yeah, I think lack of data and being data poor has been a real issue. And if I can use a fantastic lady who lives in Canada, Labrador, to sort of answer that question. Nancy calls herself a bag of walk, and she's a fabulous lady who takes her dog to the beach and collects rubbish every single day. Gosh, sorry, don't know what that was. She had been for years, she lives in Labrador, Newfoundland, Canada, and had complained on multiple occasions about how much rubbish and fishing gear, in particular lobster bands, were washing up on the beaches. She wasn't really listened to. She was poo-pooed, she was sent away, we don't have a problem, there's nothing to see here, that sort of response. She jumped on board during our beta phase testing, and she sort of blew us away with her enthusiasm and her willingness to improve the app on our behalf. Gave us brilliant feedback, and then was actually able to take, after she'd gathered all this data along the beaches and taken the photos. And that's such a cool thing with the app, if I can still say cool and I'm not too old. You can actually go on to the app, you press the globe icon instead of the camera, and then you can go and see, okay, what's happening in Newfoundland, Canada, or Indonesia, or wherever else you want to see. Chile, whatever. And if you look at Newfoundland, Canada, we can start to see the photos that have been collected by Nancy. We can actually stand on that beach with her and look down and see all the bottles, the ghost nets, the lobster bands, etc. So then it didn't take long with the technology that she then had and these images and data and proof for the authorities in Canada to start sitting up and listening to her. And I think that's the thing. A lot of the times maybe we don't really want to look and face up to the issues and the problems that are on our doorstep. But when you've got proof, physical proof like this in photos on a maritime charted map, and you know exactly where it is, you know exactly what it is, it's very, very hard to ignore. So now the Canadian authorities have a very different mindset. They have come on board, they are looking at this data, they are talking to people. We've had calls, from journalists in Canada, and, waves have been made, if I can say that. So now things are going to be put in place, we hope. Obviously, I don't know what that will be, but the fact that we've made them sit up and listen means that we're going to hopefully, that's going to lead to action. That's
great. How would data help you on the front line?
Again, it helps raise awareness of what's going on. I think we've seen a lot of documentaries and evidence in other countries, but everyone kind of thinks, well, not on our doorstep. But actually here on the Isle of Man, it is an issue. And that's why people like Plastic Busters and Beach Buddies have had to establish themselves, because there is a problem, and it's something that we need to make people aware of, definitely.
Anyone else like to jump in at this point?
I think that, just from our perspective as a flag state, and the reason that we became a member of Eyesea and I became an ambassador of Eyesea, we have 9,000 seafarers on our ships and yachts sailing around the world. If we can get half of them to download the app and start reporting what they're seeing in the world, again, it's that data. Getting those data analytics, being able to chart where those garbage or obstruction containers, washed over the side containers, all of those types of things that are hazards, not just to the environment, but to shipping as well.
Yeah. That's the only thing I think we haven't seen yet is a container.
But
I think we know it happens, and we know it won't be long until we get that image. Yeah.
Darren, anything for yourself?
Well, I think having the data, it gives people opportunities to hold certain parts accountable. If you're producing all this plastic and it's going, where is it going? Where does it end up? One-use single bottles and plastic bags and all the rest of it. But on a mass scale, where's the rubbish getting taken? Who's responsible for that? Why is it getting washed off? And if you've got the data, you can address the people in power with the authorities to make those changes and pressure them with a global awareness when it's just people speaking. I mean, you mentioned we do have issues on the island, but and there's no doubt. The thing I've seen is a great initiative to make a change with that. Yeah. And that's, when you see that, that's encouraging to see there's a lot of the youth or a lot of people going, we don't want this anymore, and we're going to clean it up, and let's try and do something about it as best we can with the technology that we've got.
Yeah. It's about changing mindsets as well and things like that. In the video that everyone saw there, Beach Buddies have got 16,000 volunteers helping. Wow. Yeah. That's a huge percentage of the Isle of Man population. Yeah. And you consider that the government here have just done a single-use plastic consultation. So they're obviously starting to listen to people and the comments, and they've got ambassadors within the government departments to look at reducing single-use plastic and things like that. So the government are taking note now and really responding to people. That's great.
Yeah, so thank you very much for your question there, and please do keep them coming. Okay, we'll move on now. So how will green or technology be used to improve how we deal with the environment? And I'd like to open up with Cath on that one.
Sure. Basically, obviously I don't want to start repeating myself, but within the maritime industry, we're a maritime industry company. We're not initiative, I should say, sorry. We're not environmentalists. We're a non-profit, maritime-driven. And the seafarers and the shipping maritime industry has been incredible in moving us forward. What the green tech means to us is, as well as talking to other environmentalists or environmental groups or community groups and authorities that want to make a difference, is we have the best reach to see what's actually going on in the ocean. You know, there is so much report, and there's, you know, we've all seen, you know, that image of the turtle with the straw up its nose. You know, that sort of thing has led to the banning of single use straws, etc. But actually, although there's all these facts and figures about how much plastic there is in the ocean, we don't have that data, we don't have the images, and now we have, you know, through companies, as Cam's just said, that are offering us ships and people that are willing to download the app and take photos, we'll be able to see what is actually going on at sea and collect data and evidence there.
Great. Cam, if you'd like to go in.
And I think there's lots of different uses for green technology. I suppose from a ship registry's perspective, within the last sort of 12 months, we've introduced remote survey and inspection technology. So we've contracted with a company called Registry, and what that allows us to do is connect with smartphones on board ships and actually do surveys and inspections remotely. So it doesn't sound like a big step. It was for us. You know, traditionally it's a boots on deck physical inspection of ships and yachts. However, this technology has really come to light over the last 18 months, and we believe that will continue to play a massive part of what we do in the future, to the extent that we're currently looking at how we revise our flag state inspection policies, where we may reduce the amount of physical inspections over a 5-year period, but increase the amount of remote inspections. And we can do that and still reduce the not insurmountable amount of air miles that we were using before, you know, and that's massive for us, you know. It's,
absolutely. It's exactly what we're doing here. You know, we would have been in London physically. We've all flown to London, and here we are, you know, in a studio, and it looks fantastic. And later on, I'm sure you've seen the Ben McCree already manoeuvring in the background, and yet we are, you know, we've reduced our footprint just by being here, really. So, Mr. Darren, the same question for yourself.
Well, I think there's various ways for technology. I mean, just having Zoom and Facebook and being able to interact with people. I mean, those things in itself. I think, like Cam mentioned, the last 18 months when we've all been forced to use it, we've seen what a great tool it is. As you said, you know, we're always flying around, going to a meeting, and you know, you could go to London for a day, especially from the Isle of Man. You could fly there, have a meeting, fly back, and then you think, well, why can't we just do it like this? And it makes a lot more sense. I think there's also opportunities for, you know, governments or investors and to look at subsidising people that are bringing new technologies in, like inventions and, you know, innovative like green power, tidal, solar, wind, geothermal, but clean up technologies. There was a young gentleman who created that boat that was scooping up plastics in rivers and things like that. I mean, they should be encouraged and subsidised or you know, invested in heavily. And from an economic point of view, you know, there's a whole new job market available there to move away from the old. I mean, we've done it before with, you know, the Industrial Revolution up till today. Everything's changing. We're in a global world that is changing fast. And we need to adapt to that, but I think it's encouraging. You know, from a farming point of view, from a runoff, which I think is a big thing as well. You know, they've got the technologies now for, you know, it's been around for a long time, but people are starting to invest in hydroponics and airponics and reducing the amount of water that's being used. You know, the solar panels, wind panels, and the products, you know, it's not having pesticides coming out. You know, being able to monitor all sorts of, you know, pollutants in the water that we probably wouldn't have been able to before, whether it be oil or pesticides. I think we're heading in the right direction. We've just got to keep encouraging. We need the support from the people in power to make sure these are financed and encouraged. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah,
moving forward.
Absolutely. And within the Wildlife Trust, what sort of green technology are you looking at or using and to go forward?
So sort of building on what the others have really talked about, really, you know, obviously Zoom and the example of us all sat here today rather than being down in London. Obviously, remote monitoring, again, is a great thing for us. A prime example is we, when funding allows, we go out and do seal surveys around the Isle of Man, but that involves a lot of boat time, a lot of people time. Obviously, there's the emissions associated with that, whereas there's the possibility now of using drones and that kind of thing, and also remote sensing equipment for water monitoring. So put a buoy out in the sea, leave it out there, and it can send signals through satellites, or you only go out once a month to collect the data rather than going out every day or every week to collect the data. So not only are you getting more bang for buck, but obviously emissions again are being reduced, and it's that reduction in carbon footprints. One of the other things is sort of bioengineering for new harbours and things now is really quite interesting. As you can imagine, harbour walls generally tend to be quite smooth and quite plain and concrete made usually, but what we're trying to encourage is more sort of space for marine life to grow on them. So you have like little bigger crevices for the marine life to get into, or there's more texture to the cement finish and things like that to allow seaweeds and animals and plants to find a home there. Quite often we know that vessels are can move invasive species around the place. And obviously the first place they go to is another harbour. And for some reason, a lot of the invasive species quite like harbours to attach to, and that's because they don't have the same competition as they would in the marine environment normally, in a natural environment. Whereas if we can make the harbours more natural, they'll less likely to be able to grow and inhabit there because they get outcompeted by the native local species. So there's lots of new technology coming out that's quite interesting. And obviously now that we know where the litter is, and we always talk about the garbage, the Pacific garbage patch and things like that, there's a lot of evidence for that now because of the data that's being collected. And obviously the continuing work that Catherine and everyone is involved with is fantastic. But now there's that technology now to go in and clean the plastic out, you know, you've got the technology is always developing for that and things, so that'll come on leaps and bounds, I think, in the next 18 months, which would be fantastic.
That's great news, great news. Okay, so we'll move on to another question from the audience now. So, is the Isle of Man working with mainland UK and Ireland in respect to pollution and spills making its way to the island, and what steps, if any, are being taken? I'll open up to the floor. Who would like to have a go at that one? Okay. We're all looking at you, Cam, there.
Yes, there is. So there's work that's done with the UK between UK port authorities, UK harbours, UK government bodies and the Isle of Man. So pollution spills are monitored within the Irish Sea. Anything that's thought to be a pollution incident within the Irish Sea would be reported between both jurisdictions.
And do you see marine pollution on the front line in terms of on the beaches on the Isle of Man? Is it something that you get reported quite often?
Thankfully, we don't get reports very often. It's quite often in harbours more than anything, and it links to dirty bilge water or in one case, a fishing vessel that sunk in one of the harbours. So it's things like that, but generally that would be down to DEFRA, to the Environmental Protection Unit, to deal with those. But it is good that the members of the public let us know about those sorts of things, yeah.
Okay, anyone else like to contribute? No, move on. Thank you very much for your question there, that's great. We'll take one more from the audience. So the bacteria project mentioned to clean oil from spills by breaking it down. Has it been tested against other known marine organisms for efficiency and suitability, for example, coral and certain sea sponges, as they are very sensitive? And that is very much directed at Marine Clean.
Yes, that's a very good question. So Marine Clean, with bioremediations, it has been out for quite a long time, well, 10, 15 years it's been in use. It was primarily land-based, and being from the marine industry, we wanted to ensure that it could have survivability in the saltwater, and we were having problems with that at the start. So we've spent probably 2 years with scientists getting to a stage where it can sustain itself in the saltwater. But obviously we went through MARPOL compliance, and with MARPOL compliance, marine pollution, they basically tested on certain sensitive animals. I mean, I used to do a lot of aquaria, so I'm very, very conscious of how sensitive corals are and fish, and just the temperatures, the levels, pH, everything. They're very, very sensitive creatures. So they did do a lot of testing on that, and that's how we got the MARPOL compliance. So whether it was on corals, on mussels, on fish in general. So we did all that. That was probably about an 18-month study. And then you get a certificate, MARPOL compliant. It explains exactly what's in there and what they have tested it on. Fortunately, nothing was harmed in the process. And once we got to that stage, then we were comfortable to go to market and say, right, this is perfect for not just freshwater and land-based, but for the salt environment. That's not going to harm anything, and especially if you are around in reefs. Being from Australia, you've got Ningaloo Reef, Great Barrier Reef, super sensitive areas. You only need the sheens to go on there, the rainbow side of things, whereas the bacteria encapsulates the oil and takes it under the surface and then eats it. And once it's finished eating it and there's no oil left to eat, it cannibalises itself, so there's nothing left. And then the last one will basically die out. But, the studies have been done and we have documentation to say that, so great. Otherwise we wouldn't have put it to market.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much for that question. We'll move on to question 4 now, and we know we've got a number of other, but we'll get to them. But the next question is, plastic and marine pollution, how bad actually is it, and how can we move forward in the maritime sector? So I know we've probably covered this a little bit more, but how bad is it out there?
Well, it still is a problem,
yeah.
Even though we've got some great organisations out there collecting marine litter and the such, we still have a problem. So I don't know if any of you've seen recently in the news, but there's a seal down at the Sound that's got some cargo net round its neck.
Yeah.
So this is a prime example that there is still a problem. As much as we're all trying very hard to do our bit, it's still there. We're still sort of seeing birds being caught as well. So it is still a problem. And there is still more that we need to be doing. Yeah,
I mean we've mentioned Eyesea, you're getting in the data and everything like that. Cam, have you got anything to add to that?
Only from my experience from being at sea and what we hear from our seafarers, the big river estuaries are always going to be a problem because they're generally where the ports are and they're generally near where population is, and the build-up of plastic waste, plastic bottles, around those areas is still significant around the world. And it's not, the UK, Isle of Man. I think those will be the areas where you'll find most of that sort of areas around populated areas. But we don't have any of the big river systems that the rest of the world does. But ports and harbours, certainly, that's where we get a lot of reports of floating garbage especially.
I think measurable data is, definitely the way to go. So we've got Clean Waterway Initiatives who developed in Hong Kong and are sponsored by HSBC. Nick Thompson is another Eyesea ambassador, and he's been working with us and Jebson's, and we're looking into doing a survey of Manila Bay. And we're obviously really, really excited about this and the fact that HSBC are, sponsoring some time, vessel and men. And I think we need the data to have that impact so we know what our next steps are going to be. As Cam said, harbours and ports in particular, are really worrying. And then it's also thinking about the density of the problems and the issues and the amount of plastics. So sometimes, the imagery that we get for Eyesea, it might be a beautiful beach and there's, a couple of plastic bottles that have been washed up. But then we've also got the Vasai beach cleaners, and they've been sending footage from just outside Mumbai in the mangrove swamps area. Mm-hmm. And it just takes your breath away. The density, there's plastic upon plastic upon plastic upon plastic. So that's another thing that Eyesea can now do and step in. We've been liaising and talking with them, and we're going to organise a clear up with them. So I think that's a brilliant role for us, you know, to find people on the ground, because there's always going to be people, and that's the great thing. People want to help, they want to make a difference. You know, the local photographer that posted, as you just mentioned, the seal with the fishing net wrapped around it, you know, every heart broke looking at that photo. I can't imagine a single person that didn't want to actively do something. And I think that's why Eyesea has been sort of so well received, because it does give people a very simple and easy way to act and make a difference. We all have, you know, the technology, we all have a mobile phone. We usually, unfortunately, always have it with us now. It's very rare that we all go for, you know, a walk along the coast, or we go anywhere without the mobile phone. So by downloading the free app, taking an image, selecting the easy icon, we've got, you know, oil spills, we've got nets, we've got fishing gear, we've got regular pollution. You're actually then adding to the maritime data map, and that's what we'd like to do. We'd like to have the biggest maritime, the biggest world global data map of, you know, data pollution. Put my teeth in. Pollution, and then we can start seeing, you know, basically what the composition is, what's the distribution, and that's why we've been drawn to projects like Manila Bay and the Mumbai mangrove swamps, because we can see how much of a problem there is there.
I think that's the key thing, though. One of the things that was striking to me was when you opened up the map feature, you actually saw all the areas that were affected. And I think as humans, again, we need to see the physical damage that's being caused for us to react. And that was the one thing when I opened up the Eyesea app, and you can actually, you just get to see probably a small percentage of what's actually out there, but it still made you go, wow, you know, this is a big issue. And again, as Cameron said, you know, as a mariner, I have coming into some ports across the globe, and you know, you're busy tying up and you look over the side and you go, I will not fall into that water. I will do everything possible, because it is just appalling. But
but we also, you know, are very, very aware, and we want to protect seafarers as well. So all the data that is collected is absolutely anonymous. We are certainly not the police in any shape or form. None of this is about trying to hold people accountable or pointing fingers. You know, accidents happen. I mean, I've been desperate. We mentioned, you know, fishing for litter that's going on the island. I mean, I've been like actively stalking fishermen. I have been down to Peel and Port Erin, and I've got a very, very understanding husband. I'm off to stalk fishermen again. Okay, lovely. And you know, and I know, like Graham, the founder of Eyesea, you know, he's also got a very understanding partner, because he is spending his evenings pretty much WhatsApping seafarers, and that's, you know, but that's fantastic for us, because that's how much interest there is, that's how many people want to help, etc. So yeah, it's just really important. And honestly, the more people that feel like I need to do something just by taking a simple photo on a free app, you know, you are going to start to make a difference, because data, you know, really is everything. And we are talking to software companies. We do want to take next steps. We've been kind of running on fumes and prayers, and, you know, fabulous input from all our sponsors and partners. But we are looking into AI. Obviously, you talked about green technology earlier, and that would be a definite step that would be fantastic for us to take, again, to basically clean up and make sure there are no images of, you know, people or names of boats, because as I said, safety is priority. So at no point would we say, you know, to a seafarer, you have to take a picture because look, there's pollution right there. Only when it's safe to do so. And we've also been talking, because we've got such great relationships with people like Cam, etc. There's obviously safeties depending on the kind of vessel that you're on, and you know, we've found ways around that. We've worked with teams of people. There's always, you know, a safety camera on board when you're on a vessel where you're not supposed to have a mobile phone to hand, and that's another feature of the app. You can download photos later as well.
So. Did you want to jump in there, Lara?
I was just going to say, it's just to build on that. Really, it's lovely to see, you know, that people are changing their mindsets. You know, people are so much on board with this kind of thing. As a scuba diver, we often see ghost fishing gear and stuff, and we often bring that sort of thing up. But one of our favourite dives is affectionately known as the Bottle Run, and it's out of Douglas Bay, and it's where the boats coming out of harbour or going in would dump all of their rubbish over the side. And this was a very long time ago, I'm very pleased to say. So it's all the lovely old glass bottles and things like that, so it's not plastics and stuff. And it's a really interesting dive. There's some lovely history associated with that. But obviously that doesn't happen anymore. And that's from a changing mindset, which is brilliant to see. And obviously so many people involved with beach buddies and downloading the app, and all the ambassadors that you have as well linked with that. It's great to see that everyone is so concerned and wants to get involved and do their bit. And I think that's lovely. There's still more to do, but I definitely think it's really great to see that everyone's so on board with it. It's fantastic.
Great.
Just one thing I want to say on that. I think what needs to be addressed as well on a global scale, because I mean we are quite a pristine island, and you know we're in a Western world, but the poorer nations or the less developed, or they need a lot more assistance in simple things like just providing fresh water. So we send all this aid overseas, and a lot of that is weight of bottled water. So you're transporting huge amounts. Plastic is going over there. If you provided them with fresh water, that would be an alternative. Also, a lot of the ravaged nations as well, where is their waste disposal? They haven't got that infrastructure that we take for granted. We can just put stuff in a recycling bin and it's all great and it's fantastic. We all know it, but these countries, and there's a lot of them, a huge part of the world, suffer with that. And these people don't want to live in muck. I mean, there's islands there where Western countries have dumped rubbish and sold it to them. And I think it was a Plastic Ocean movie, I can't remember which one it was, but these kids are living on 15 feet of plastic, and you know that's not right. That needs to be addressed. I mean, it's really the elephant in the room. It's a huge issue. But I think a simple thing like clean water supply, so you don't have to send out bottles, and good recycling and waste management in these facilities, and that could be part of our financial age. I think that would go a long way to helping the problems that you see, especially in Asia. I mean, you go to some of these beautiful countries that are all they're tourist resorts, but you go swimming and you're literally swimming in soup, and they don't want to see it because it affects the tourism industry. Plus, they live there, so I think that could be something that could be addressed by the powers that be.
No, absolutely. Okay, what we'll do now is we'll go to another question from the audience, and we've got one. So. Here's one. Is a lot of work being done at school and government level to educate and raising awareness of the impacts of pollution to the environment? So I think that one's directed at you.
Absolutely, there is. We have an education officer within the Wildlife Trust, Dawn, and she's amazing. And she goes in and talks to the schools about all sorts of conservation issues, not just sort of litter and pollution and things like that, but she goes in a lot. She's full-time and she talks to groups outside of schools, so brownies, scouts, and groups like that to talk about that. And obviously the government do as well. They have someone from the waste management plant who can go in and talk to groups as well about things that are going on. So there's lots that the government are doing as well as the Wildlife Trust. So yes, I'm pleased to say there is a lot. And actually when you go into the primary schools now, it's great to see because all of the children have their own reusable water bottles, and the secondary schools are getting there. They're not quite there, but now I'm seeing refillable stations for the water and things. So it's absolutely fantastic. All the children come in and they've all got their little Peppa Pig or Paw Patrol reusable water bottles, whatever the in thing is at the time. So yes, and it really is starting to filter through, which is fantastic.
Oh, that's good. Anyone else like to jump on that? Have you seen it?
So we've got some junior ambassadors as well, and just here on the Isle of Man, especially during lockdown, I think things, although schooling continued so well from home, like everything else, there was also some areas that were difficult for people to fulfill, like Cath during the IB. So I had quite a few friends who I'd probably bored to tears about Eyesea and what I was doing that were also really, really interested. So I had some opportunity, you know, to talk to them and the kids. And so we've got a few people using Eyesea as a project for their Cath because they need to do local activities and help and clear up. So they're also recovering. Another sort of feature of the app you can show when you recover the pollution as well.
And of course we've got 5 police cadets joining tall ships. And one of the things the Isle of Man Maritime have asked them to do is to actually download Eyesea. Yeah. So when they're coming from Falmouth up to the Isle of Man, hopefully we'll be able to get some data there as well. Yeah. But it's driving that age group to really get involved and recognise that the police, and they know it, but living on the Isle of Man sometimes, you know, do you think that the schools globally are getting that education, or is that's the next tackle, do you think?
I think there's a lot of work that's come out from a plastic ocean. They've got a lot of resources online that are available for teachers to download. So I think some countries are better than others, but there's definitely a global movement for raising the educational bar with children, definitely.
That's great.
It is interesting though, because again, Graham has shared some of the imagery and data that we've got, and one of the things that he put on was to guess basically where this data was coming from, and there's actually quite a lot of rubbish and pollution that's always dropped near schools and also near sort of recreational areas where they've got maybe BMX and skateboard tracks and things like that. So yeah, it's interesting. I think educating the youth is the way to go, but whether they're, you know, going to take it in or they're typical teenagers or being lazy or whatever, I don't know. No, but I think all of us are hoping to do the right thing, and I think it will filter through.
That's
definitely.
great.
It's definitely changed from this generation from ours,
Yeah.
as far as what we do. And you know, you can see they pull you up on it, and you know, we've got humans involved, but I think there's a definite huge change that you can see over the last 30, 40 years.
Great. All right, if we can go to our next question. How can my organisation sign up and support Eyesea? That's a well-placed question there, isn't it?
We have a website. We have a website. We're eyesea.org. It's very, very easy to remember, and everything you need to know is on that site. The more the merrier. We do actually have some really influential, we're very, very lucky. We've got, obviously I mentioned Chartworld before, they're our navigational side, and they've been huge in getting us to where we are today. But right here on the Isle of Man, BSM were one of the first to jump on board, and they've gave us incredible data and, you know, helped us to know that we were definitely on the right path, that this was needed, it was required, and it was also looked for.
It's an easy app to download too. I mean,
yeah,
it's very simple to use, good interface.
Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Keep selling.
Yeah, no, that's great. I like it. There you go.
It's very nice. You know, we've got the odds are in my favour, shall we say, using a popular novel with my 2 lovely Eyesea ambassadors here. But yeah, we've had incredible support from GAC, Wilhelmsen, Oldendorf, Zeeborn, Swire, Bulk, Odgefell, MPC container ships, Fraser yachts. You know, these are fantastic
Isle of Man
members.
Maritime.
I was just about to say, and obviously, you know, I've got Isle of Man Maritime to my right, and I've got the Isle of Man Ship Registry to my left. And, you know, the fact that you guys have come on board and you've wholeheartedly leapt in and sort of fully doused yourselves and helped us get where we are means a huge lot, and we are so humbled, so thank you.
Oh, we've got a ship registry question here. So how does the Isle of Man Ship Registry have very strict governance criteria around environmental compliance for those companies wanting to register their vessels with the Isle of Man?
Yes, the answer is yes. We do have regulations in place. We have national regulations which implement all the international conventions on pollution prevention, predominantly MARPOL and its 6 annexes. which cover oil pollution, garbage, emissions from ships. So yes, we have a very comprehensive framework of national legislation which doesn't prohibit companies from registering in the Isle of Man, but has strict compliance to all of those international conventions. And we also have enforcement actions we can take for companies and ships that decide to not comply with those national legislation.
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much for that question. I'll add these two in together because they're again for our Eyesea, but how much interest have Eyesea had in users and ships, and is there a main contact in the UK to get involved?
Well, we're basically global, and you know that's a fantastic feature with the 60 plus ambassadors that we've got. We do have a lot based here in the Isle of Man, thanks to me stalking all of you as well as fishermen. Yeah. But we have, GAC, I just mentioned them on board. We have ambassadors in the UK and globally, and I think again, thinking about carbon footprint, etc. It doesn't matter where we are. It doesn't matter where whoever wants to get involved is. It's not really about sort of certain areas per se. It's getting as many people as possible involved and taking data. And I mean, this has been truly a phenomenal week for Eyesea. You know, we are so grateful to the Professional Network London for our nominee, and then also to the network of young shipping professionals who voted us. So we've won our first award. Yes, that's right. We've only been going since July, so to actually have this sort of recognition so early in our journey is incredible. So we've got now access through these 25 companies to thousands of ships right now. Obviously, because we're still new, now that it's accessible from Google Play and Apple iStore, it's going to speed things up, hopefully, about downloading and getting everything onto the vessels. We have clear onboarding instructions. So if you are a captain of a ship and you're interested, or you're an owner of a fleet or whatever, we can send onboard instructions to you. As I said earlier, safety and anonymity are two huge concerns, and we are never, wanting anyone to sort of feel under threat. Obviously, we're aware that you have to be very careful in certain ports, and they're not going to like the idea that somebody's taking negative photos. So everything is done to protect the camera. The photo that you take does not store onto your camera roll. And so when we're thinking more about the eco-warriors and people that have loved jumping on, Eyesea as well, and using that while they're doing their cleanups, they are also able to take their normal pictures, because they do their Instagrams and everything else, and then you can download from your camera roll straight onto Eyesea as well. You just need to obviously know the location. And then they are time-stamped. They are geolocated, so the data that we're gathering, it will tell you when you look at your map. We actually had a great experience yesterday, didn't we, Darren? Darren had taken a photo and basically was asking me, how do I know it's there? How do I know if you can see it? So I opened my app and I said, found Douglas Bay where he said it was, clicked on it, and there it was, a Men at Work sign washed up on the beach from our ongoing prom shenanigans. And only Isle of Man people will get that, but it's quite taxing and trying at the moment. So, and just that, we had a great connection there. It was like, wow,
so I didn't download the app. And it was a while ago I took the photo. So I just wanted to know, can we send old photos of that sort of stuff so you can still, and it worked well.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Perfect.
Great. All right, that leads us nicely on now to, during the webinar, we've been running a poll, so thank you very much for everyone that has participated. The question was, what is your organisation doing to reach net zero or reduce your carbon footprint? And the answer, the down the line was organisational transformation, global networks, office structures, policy, process, procedures, and company travel. Number 2 was investing in the application of alternative ship fuels. 3 was implementing environmental social goals, ECGs, or sustainability development goals, SDGs. And the last one was invest in collaboration with the maritime industry, private, public, non-profit and innovative green technologies. And I think the winner there was definitely the investing in collaboration with the maritime industry. That got 50%. We had a tie for organizational transformation in global networks, offices, so on. Tie investing in the application of alternative fuels. And last was implementing environmental social goals and also SDGs. Is that sort of where you thought that was going to go?
Well, I think we need to collaborate with each other and make things change. That's the best way to do it. I think that's a correct response, really.
Yeah, yourself? Was that
I would say it's not surprising. I think a lot of that 50% will be collaborating, well, within green technology space. Also includes alternatives to traditional fuels, etc., etc. Energy efficiency technology, so that's not surprising. And also not surprising about companies investigating the application of alternative ship fuels. I think just about every shipping company in the world is now investing in something alternative. So, for me, that looks about right.
Yeah, I think coordination and cooperation is the way to go. We need to work together and make sure the right hand knows what the left hand's doing, etc., and talk. And I think, from Eyesea's perspective as well, we very much see the maritime industry as having the potential, to be champions in this area, to take it forward. 70% of the planet is covered in water, and the maritime industry cross it all the time. So if we start getting the data in that we hope to, coordination and cooperation.
And absolutely, it shows really with the panel in terms of we have a ship regulator, we have green technologies, and we have yourself on the front line that deals with it. I think it's been fantastic. So I think that's where we will leave today. We've got 35 seconds. I was told everyone it was going to go quick. It's amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a fantastic webinar series. Isle of Man Maritime has been very proud to put this together. I'd like to thank the team from ELS and my esteemed panelists for coming in and having that conversation. Thank you to Nathan, who's been running the questions for us, and to you, the delegates. Thank you for your fantastic questions. We will be back in 2 years, hopefully all together at London. However, I think that with future technology, this is the stage, everything, even though we can see green, you're saying you're seeing a fantastic stage. And that's all been designed here on the Isle of Man by ELS Studios. So thank you to the team there. Thank you very much for joining us, and we hope to see you all again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.